Also, warm welcome from my side. So my name is Amos Kromer. I'm part of Westernacher and based actually in Switzerland, Zurich, where I'm, let's say, responsible for the topic of supply chain planning, or we have, let's say, different words being used today for the topic of supply chain planning, such as sales and operations planning, of which we have also part for example, the inventory optimization, supply planning, demand planning, and so on, right? So this is a quite hot topic right now. It's even getting more hot, based, of course, on the current context that we have with the COVID crisis of the last 2 years and many other events that are currently, let's say, really disrupting our end-to-end value chain. So now clients really start to understand, those that haven't really done the work before, that actually right now it's also a good time to really look at this topic, especially when you want to have an end-to-end visibility from a, let's say, really value chain point of view. This is, let's say, the topic of this today's webinar, let's say, that I would like to introduce to you. So the title is really how to plan the fulfillment of customer expectations, actually, centrally in a decentral organization with a state-of-the-art S&OP. So let's maybe start quickly with the agenda of today. So it's quite pragmatic. So the first part, I would quickly like to introduce you to today's business question that we would like to tackle today, and for what we would like to have or to elaborate together a solution. Then in the second part, we're gonna talk how to build up actually such a supply chain planning approach, or let's say S&OP, right? So that you really see also in some pragmatic steps how to do it, so that you also get an idea in case you are already, let's say, starting such a journey within your company, how you could do it. And in the third step, we'll also then quickly introduce you a bit to the way how we implement from Westernacher those solutions actually with you as clients. Okay, as said, let's start first of all with the business question we would like to tackle today. I have written it in this way. So the question is really how to plan the fulfillment of customer demand centrally in a decentral organization. So what does that mean actually concretely if we look at this? We have here, let's say, a matrix. What this matrix is actually showing you is, let's say, a really simple example of an entire fictive organization or a firm, right? So maybe let's quickly start with this left side. So in here, we have a so-called value chain, how it is set up from a really easy point of view with, let's say, beginning with an ERP in which the organization is normally today at home, right? Then we have, of course, suppliers, we have countries in which we have our plants, we have warehouses, we have products, and we have the markets, and on these markets we have customers, right? Along this value chain, we often, of course, have a different unit of measures and KPIs, which we track in the context of planning. For example, from a supplier point of view, of course, we have procurement, unit of measures and KPIs. On a plant level, we have production unit of measures and KPIs. On a warehouse point of view, we have inventory unit of measures and KPIs. And of course, if we really get more and more to the market, we have so-called distribution unit measures and KPIs. Also, if we follow the path of a value chain, everything starts, of course, with the raw material that we procure from suppliers, and then that is then, let's say, built up into semi-finished goods, finished goods, and then is also distributed to the client. A third dimension, of course, of our entire business. So really, if you try to put your business into this, let's say, little matrix here, we also have, of course, something really important. That is, let's say, the production, the inventory, and the fulfillment strategy. That is, let's say, really the backbone of your business, that where these three things together, of course, drive how we serve a customer at the end of the day, right? So we might have today people from businesses that are, let's say, maybe more in the engineering to order part, or other ones that are more in the assemble to order, or configure to order, make to order, or make to stock, right? So when we quickly have, let's say, this first view on a business, how it is built up, especially from a value chain point of view, let's say this is a pragmatic way how you can set it up. And on the left side here, what you can see as an example, I just set up here an example based on the experience that we also got from different other customers. We often see then, for example, that we have, first of all, multiple ERPs that are, let's say, homes of these different organizations that we would like to have in. So this is really, let's say, an entire matrix of a potential value chain. But what is the most important thing of this pitch today and of this slide here is actually on the level of customers, we define, let's say, the customer demand along 4 dimensions. Of course, what we have learned in that is, let's say, always important, that what will never change along the different events on this world is, let's say, what customer expectation really is, right? The customer is expecting, of course, the right product in full, on time, at a good price or price-cost relation, right? So the question is actually, our decentral organization that we have here, how can we, let's say, drive with this one, or let's say serve with this organization the multiple clients that we have here along our market, right? So this is, let's say, first of all, the entire matrix as you have it also in your organization. And the thing is, the question is really, how can we, let's say, plan this part here in a really good way that is decentral, right, to really achieve good performance on a customer level. So then the question is, of course, how to build up such a necessary new integrated planning approach. First step, and in this case, first of all, we need to select a certain platform, a certain supply chain planning platform. In this case today, we're going to select the so-called SAP IBP. That is actually SAP's latest state-of-the-art supply chain planning platform that we're going to use here in this case to build up our supply chain planning approach. So how does it look like? The most important thing, just to mention from the beginning on, it's a network-based planning approach, right? So it's often what we also see still today is that many customers try or have, from a historical point of view, build up supply chain planning platforms, for example, on a business warehouse. But since a value chain is something that is network-based, we need here as well, in order to accommodate such a network-based planning, we need to have a platform that has as a characteristic this network embedded. This is why SAP has built this SAP IBP platform in order to accommodate that. Another picture how to interact with the platform is we have, of course, not only the visuals such as here, so the dashboards and the network itself, but we have, of course, also the front ends where we can then manipulate at the end of the day the data itself. And in this case, IBP is making use of a so-called Excel front end, but also on is also based on a so-called web browser-based user interface through which you can interact with the solution. If we go quickly through the setup or how the SAP IBP platform is built, so you can see here we have the SAP IBP. that is, let's say, built on 6 different tool sets or so-called modules. But what is quite important here, I will quickly summarize what the platform can do based on these 4 points here. So first of all, what is quite important to mention here, we have here as well the possibility to depict so-called financial supply chain. So this supply chain planning approach is not only something that is done in volume, but the IBP is also built up in a way that you can really plan side by side in volume, value, so price, direct cost, gross margin together on one network. So this is the first, let's say, bigger change that happened, let's say, compared to the older platforms that you had at the beginning, such as APO and so on. Then as the next big topic, what the SAP IBP platform is covering is, of course, demand planning. So demand planning in here, you really have a rich content that gives us the possibility, first of all, to model all kind of product customer combinations, to do advanced segmentation, to do the phase in, phase out, of course. So really how to plan new products, how to plan the phase out of products, to map in all kind of demand signals, such as the history, such as the orders. If you are more in a make to order or let's say engineer to order environment, we can also map projects in, and of course also bring sales input in. Then we have a really big content in regards to advanced forecasting that you can make use, forecast consumption, forecast errors, and so on. You can use here in order to also better plan at the end of the day the forecast accuracy. The next big thing that this platform has in is everything that goes around inventory planning. So when we talk about inventory planning in the context of SAP IBP, we really talk about an inventory planning that is multi-stage and multi-level oriented. So this means it does not only optimize or tries to optimize stock location by location, but it really goes from the finished good warehouse down to the procurement. It sees and depicts the entire inventory network in order to find the best stock levels according to the supplying lead times and of course as well to the forecast that we submit. This is really a super interesting topic within IBP as well. And then we have, of course, the supply planning part that is of course also very important. So this means in here we have all the topics covered, such as material requirement planning. So this really means here we are able to take demand and propagate it across the entire network. We can do the entire resource requirement planning, capacity, distribution, production planning, and for example, of course, also ATP check for incoming sales orders is also, let's say, covered in this platform. And these, let's say, functionalities or key capabilities are distributed among these 6 modules. Important to mention is that these 6 modules are not, let's say, not integrated. So the entire platform is one stack of code, so it's nothing that you need to integrate in between. It's just here a distinguish, and we just distinguish by licensing. So this is all these boxes are just here from an SAP side to distinguish what capabilities you can use. At the end of the day, what is also important to mention is, of course, the integration possibilities here. So we can integrate external suppliers, external customers. We can integrate different ERP systems. What is, of course, the most important one as a source system is especially the SAP ERP, but we also have already integrated the JDE. We can integrate other forecasts coming from different streams, BI systems such as from SAP and Microsoft, or we can, of course, also integrate our suppliers directly, for example, over Ariba that you might also know. Okay, now I gave you a quick introduction to the platform that we are going to use here in order to build up such a supply chain planning platform. What will be now important is, as a second step, before we talk about any planning process, is first of all to create a so-called digital value chain on this IBP. So as you remember, I started to introduce you this entire value chain here from an example point of view. So now the first step, what we're gonna do, if we have such an organization or value chain in front of us, we will, first of all, as a first step, we will, let's say, model all these fixed points here. So we will take these points as a first step and bring them into the network. And obviously, such as you might know, these points are the master data, right? As the next point, what we're gonna do once we have, let's say, built up the entire static objects of the value chain, as a second step, we will then start to bring in all demand, material, resource, direct cost, and price flows on the network. The third point will then be that we're gonna bring in all the unit of measures and KPIs that you need to use for the planning, right? Because without those unit of measure and KPIs, you would not be able to really quantify the planning. The fourth step will then be, and this is also really important, we will then actually start to set the right inventory, fulfillment, and production strategy. Because every one of you here that is today in this webinar has, of course, a different business model that, let's say, has a different inventory, fulfillment, and production strategy. And of course, what we want to create is we want to bring life and a certain dynamism into this organization. So let's maybe look into a more concrete example here. So the same steps that I just told you here, we're going to quickly elaborate it here based on this screenshot. So what you can see here, this is a real screenshot from an IBP system, just to show you that this system is a network-based planning. This means, as said, first step, what we're going to do is we're going to model all these static nodes here. So this means we will bring in the plants, the warehouses, the customers, and the suppliers. So these nodes that you can see here are, let's say, plants, warehouses, customers, and so on. So these are the static ones, and these are, of course, the master data from the ERPs. So we are going to pull out these different master data and bring it into this network structure. As a second point, what we're gonna then do is we're gonna bring, as soon as we have the network, we're gonna bring in here the so-called demand flows, material flows, resource flows, direct cost, and price flows. So this means we will have here, so these lanes that you can see in here are actually transactional data. So we're gonna bring in here data as well from the ERP or other source systems in order to depict, let's say, the cost, the resource, the materials, and the price flows. So this will be the second thing. The third thing, as said, what we're gonna then do is we bring in all the different unit of measures. And as said, right, we have different unit of measures. We have so-called unit of measures for sales and demand. We will have unit of measures for distribution. We will have unit of measures for inventory. We will have unit of measures for production. We will have unit of measures for procurement and KPIs. So this will be the third thing. So you really see we're gonna build up this network step by step so that it gets a bit crowded, that we get the material to really then plan the end-to-end value chain. The fourth point will then be, as said, every business model is unique from an inventory strategy, fulfillment strategy, and production strategy point of view. If you want to be able that the network catches the demand and knows how to propagate and proceed with the demand upstream, we need, of course, to set certain rules, right? This means we will need to teach and to configure in the network how it shall, let's say, keep the inventory strategy along finished goods, semi-finished goods, and let's say raw materials. We also need to teach the network how the fulfillment strategy works. So how do we serve the different customers? And at the end of the day, also the production strategy, right? Based on the different BOM levels that we have. And this is, let's say, these three things we also bring in here in the back end, especially of the network, to really teach the network how it needs to handle or prioritize the different demands that are coming in, and let's say then cope with it. So these are the 4 steps, let's say, that we're gonna build here up. So how is this actually possible? And what is also important to mention here is especially that that this entire network that I have just shown to you is running on a so-called dynamic product, customer, and location hierarchy. So IBP, at the end of the day, is nothing else than it's a value chain that is, let's say, based on a product, customer, and location hierarchy. This means your value chain can be viewed from a really aggregated point of view or from a really detailed point of view. This means you can start to plan every point in this cube. You can plan it and you can view it. So for example, if you want to see product customer relations, product customer and location, and so on, the cube is like a Tetris cube that is able to show you all the necessary data or all the different segments of your value chain. So at the end of the day, if we build up such a network, this network is what we call it as well, as once you have it set it up, it's for you, or it's going to act for you, such as a dictionary to translate really the market outlook into a financial and supply chain outlook. So as you have seen with these 4 steps, we are building up a network that works in a much more automated way than most of you most probably will do it today. Especially if you are still running your supply chain with Excel, I would say that this kind of network will really help you to translate the demand into supply and vice versa in order to achieve at the end of the day the right product on time in full at a good price cost relation, right? So this is really, the network serves here as a dictionary to perfectly convert the different unit of measures, to convert demand into supply, and you have now seen it, how it works. And this is just a short outlook how we built this network. You will then also get, of course, the slides, but this is just the way how we're going to build it. So all the different data points I have shown you how this network is created is actually totally based on the ERP's data, or wherever you have data. Some customers also have certain other data in the PW, but then we also going to integrate this, move it to IBP, so that we can then really depict this entire network. With that said, you already have done once, or let's say once you have set up this network, actually you have done a big step in regards to an integrated supply chain planning approach. So this means we have then once we have built this network, we are now actually ready to really talk about processes and build, based on this network, an integrated supply chain planning approach. So this means as well, the 3rd step is going then to be, once we have this network, to build a so-called integrated rolling demand and supply planning processes with the related organization across different planning horizons. So what does it really mean? In order to quickly also define a bit the wording and the naming here. So what we normally do in IBP, if you, let's say, launch such a project, or if you want to start to evaluate such a project with us, just to be aware for you here. So in IBP, we are able to build different rolling demand and supply planning processes across different planning horizons. So what does it really mean? On one side, normally we can start in IBP to, for example, set up a so-called strategic planning. This is often a planning that covers a planning horizon between 18 months to 5 years, right? So this is one part. The second part, and the most common one in IBP projects, is of course to set up a so-called sales and operations planning. So with a sales and operations planning, we refer at the end of the day towards a so-called tactical planning that is acting as a rolling demand and supply planning between 4 months to 18 months. So this means here, especially in this slot here, we are, let's say, doing a monthly rolling planning, and in this rolling planning we are, let's say, first of all, of course, defining what is the demand in euro and in the related unit of measure. So this means in volume and in value, based on statistical forecasts, based on actuals, based on the input from the sales that we get. And we have then, since we have the network set, we have then an automatic disaggregation into supply planning, right? So this means on this rolling way, we then disaggregate demand into supply to then get, let's say, the inventory, distribution, production, and procurement. What we can also do, beside the sales and operations planning, the strategic planning, is as well the so-called master production scheduling. Master production scheduling refers to the planning discipline that is really operational. Here we mainly focus on a planning approach that acts between 2 weeks and 4 months. So here we are mainly talking about demand controlling and so-called order promising. So as well, IBP is as well able to, first of all, disaggregate this tactical planning into an operational, and on this operational planning, we can then, let's say, bring in real sales orders that are coming in real time, consumed it in IBP, and IBP will then do a so-called order promising. As said, this is then, let's say, the potential process framework we can build on this value chain that I just have shown you at the beginning. So to quickly show you a more concrete example, I refer now to a sales and operations planning. And the sales and operations planning, as said, is acting as a so-called tactical planning. And just to show you here, I took with me a so-called client example. In this example, what we have done, we have first of all created this value chain, such as I have shown it to you. But on top, and this is also important to mention here, Westernacher is also able to support you in order to design the processes and also the organization if needed. So just in this case, as an example, what we have done, we had here, let's say, the so-called European market with Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Eastern Europe, Northern Europe, Southern Europe, and France, Benelux. So for this, let's say, market matrix, we had to build up a rolling or monthly rolling S&OP process. And this is the way how we build them this up, so that you have here a demand planning that starts at the beginning of the months, that moves then into an inventory planning by mid of the months, and goes into then the so-called supply planning by the 3rd week of the month until the balancing and the exec review. What is important to mention here, this entire process, this entire planning across this entire organization is built on one single platform, IBP. Means that you can really see, we start here, first of all, with a statistical forecast that is then disaggregated into regional forecasts, where you have then different stakeholders such as key account managers, sales managers, sales cluster managing directors that are together defining the demand for this specific market. Once every market has done their specific sales and demand planning, this forecast is then aggregated again into a so-called business unit review. So as you have seen at the beginning, I have shown you the cube. So the cube is first of all beginning on a global level, then we disaggregate into a local, and then once we have got all the inputs from a local level, we aggregate again into a global level. And from here, once we have done the demand, we can make one move into inventory. So here, once we have defined demand is directly translated into inventory requirements, where then the specific inventory specialist can plan what inventory is actually needed here in order to fulfill this demand. Once the inventory team has done their work, they pass over their plan to the capacity review teams that, let's say, analyze, now we have the demand, we have this material, what do we need from a capacity point of view in hours, so machine hours and labor hours, right? Once they have done it, they finalize the plan, they move it to the top management that then also drives further certain analysis, scenarios, and it's then going into the so-called executive meeting that will be the most important meeting on a monthly basis for the entire organization, where they then say, okay, this will then be our plan, this is what we can sell, or that what we want to sell, this is what we can deliver, and this is then the plan we go forward, right? And you can, as you can see, they do this in a monthly rolling way, highly dynamic, to really anticipate what is going on the market, what is going on the supply side, and to really find then at the end of the day the balance between both sides. And this based on one platform, on one network that I've just shown to you. As said, you will get after the presentation as well the overview, what is actually done in detail per planning step, that you get a better, let's say, impression of that. This I will then deliver to you at the end. Coming back quickly to our matrix. So what does it really mean if you have set up such a value chain process and planning approach? So it's quite simple how IBP is working. So IBP is really taking the demand that we define here. So the definition of the demand can really happen in a highly sophisticated way, but also in a more simple way based on the forecast, sales history, and orders that we get. But what is quite important now to mention by the end of this presentation is how this IBP works and how it works, especially in a decentral way. This is also the reason why I brought up this matrix that we often have, but that the beauty is here, especially once we have defined the demand on a customer level, also in customer unit of measures and demand KPIs, that the platform IBP or the supply chain planning approach is directly starting to make the propagation upstream. So we make the translation directly into distribution requirements. From a unit of measure point of view, KPI, we have an automatic bill of material explosion. So you see here, bill of distribution, finished good, semi-finished good, and raw materials. So we really have this push up through the entire organization across all different plants, across all different locations that we have. This logic is working in this way. And what we just also have to do, it's not only acting in a stupid way to take demand and push it through the entire organization down to supplier level, but it also helps you to evaluate the optimal distribution, inventory, production, and procurement from a direct cost point of view in accordance to the defined customer demand, right? You always have this fantastic flexibility to say, okay, this is the customer expectation. Customer wants to have this product in full at that time, at that price, but are I willing, are I able, based on the production, inventory, and fulfillment strategy that I have, to fulfill it in the way the customer wants to have it. So here you can really then take this demand, push it once through the entire organization, and really look at the demand from different point of views. How does it look like from a distribution point of view? Can we, let's say, fulfill it from a distribution point of view? Can we fulfill it from an inventory point of view based on the supplier lead times, but also what the inventory costs us, right? Also working capital. Can we fulfill it from a production requirement point of view? Is, for example, this demand challenging all the demands? So this is really the way how you really look at your entire organization. So a planning that is going through the entire matrix, right? Through the entire value chain stack. And this is, let's say, at the end of the day, in a really short, high-level point of view, outlined how this planning at the end of the day works. And it should also show you a bit here that it's a total different game to plan in this way, and especially to have the entire monitoring and controlling over the entire value chain stack, over all unit of measure, across all BOM levels, across your entire strategy, right? So this really means the ultimate target is here that we can really control all ERP, supplier, country, plant, warehouse, strategy, product, market, and customer combinations, right? This huge network that you already cope today, wherever you are coming from, you have those combinations, right? And you can outline it as a matrix, as a network. And IBP, as said, is the perfect platform to really embed this entire combinations into, or outline it into one network, and then really take all different demand and push it through it, right? So this, I would really say, is the nice engine and the nice approach behind such a planning approach. Good. I quickly have to check the clock, so we still have maybe 4 minutes. So what I just wanted to make or quickly have as a last topic here in this context, what is also really important is if you would move on such a planning approach based on SAP IBP, you will also move your today's planning approach into, let's say, a scenario and simulation based planning approach. This really means you also see it here. Of course, IBP gives you the opportunity to plan in scenarios to simulate whatever you want at the end of the day. But what I want to show here as well is, and to mention, is the importance that a certain partner, for example, Westernacher or another one, really helps you also to teach how to make use of these simulation capabilities. So in the context of such projects, we're also going to help you to learn how to use simulations, and especially also scenario planning approaches in order to drive this planning, right? You might have the possibilities to simulate demand, to simulate different supply impacts, and so on. And this is just to show you here an example of different simulation topics that we take into account here in order to assess the value chain. And as said, what you're also going to do and what we're going to teach you, especially is here also to start to drive your business, not only based on one number, but on 3 different numbers, that you really start to learn to use different numbers, the best case, baseline, and worst case scenario, and to run your business within a so-called funnel, right? So that you are really able to keep your business within a certain funnel, and based on that, then also lead your business at the end of the day. Yeah, we just quickly need to check the hour. Yeah, still some minutes. So let's say it was a really first high-level introduction of IBP, and I hope I could give you certain first inputs towards this. But if you are interested now, for example, to start with us, let's say, to talk about this topic in a more detailed way, then please call us, because how our program looks like in order to evaluate with you and implement potentially such a project is set up in a quite easy way. So the first point would be we start together with an inspiration day. So this is a free of charge offering from us, where you just call us and say, hey, Westernacher, we would like to come together with you in order that you teach us the latest and greatest, let's say, supply chain planning approach, especially based on SAP IBP. How does it look like? What does state-of-the-art S&OP looks like today? What is the technology doing? And then so that you really get a first good, let's say, upskill, teaching up you in the way how good supply chain planning looks today. And based on this inspiration day, you can then decide if you want to then follow up with us into a second, let's say, workshop. And this is then really a workshop that that is, let's say, no longer free of charge, but it's especially here to help the clients that would like to start a project but still don't have the business case. Then we help you to build up the business case within 2 days. So this means, especially in the first day, we look at your supply chain planning approach from an as-is point of view, and then we, in a second day, we come up with a vision and the to-be process, and especially also the business drivers, the business benefits, and then an entire business case report that you can then use, especially in front of your C-level, to request such a project. Once we have then done it, we would then go into a prepare phase. This means here we will then design together 4 to 6 weeks this supply chain planning approach in your company. Once we have the design of the solution, we will then move into a first pilot implementation, where we maybe gonna select only a segment of your value chain, implement their IBP, and then in the next step, roll it out. So this is actually the way how we tackle those supply chain planning, evaluation and implementations with the clients across Europe.
Great. I wish you all a nice Tuesday, and thank you for joining us today. All the best.